Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm going to be ranking the films of Stanley Kubrick, one of my personal favorite directors of all time and easily widely regarded as one of the greatest directors of all time. I'm excited to talk about his films today. Only 13 films to rank today, so that's not too bad. The first three films I'm about to talk about, I highly recommend you guys go back and watch. I know a lot of people haven't seen them. Even the biggest Kubrick fans have kind of passed these movies over, and it's important to go back and rewatch his very, very early stuff, because if you just watch his main 10 films, the ones that everybody knows, you can easily get tricked into thinking that this guy had, a 200 IQ, or he was an alien from another planet come down to give us messages. He made a lot of terrific films that spread across a bunch of different genres and were told in very different ways, and it's amazing. You could easily argue that he is the greatest, the best director to ever live, and I think it's important to go back and rewatch his earliest stuff to kind of see how he figured out how to make films the way that he did. So starting out at number 13, I have Fear and Desire. This is the first film he ever made. It came out in 1953. So he's been making films for a long time. Only clocks in at 62 minutes, so it is a bit of a shorter film, only an hour if you guys want to go check that out. I will say, though, it is his most forgettable film. It's been probably 10 years since I've seen it, so I don't remember a ton that happened in it, but it is important to go watch these early films from your favorite directors and kind of see how they figured out how to make movies. It's really interesting. At number 12, I have Killer's Kiss. This one came out in 1955, so a couple years later. It's 68 minutes, so still only about an hour. And it's a great kind of neo-noir crime mystery story that I think is very well told, even in that short, confined 60 minutes. And I also highly recommend this film. It's terrific, very underrated. At number 11, I have The Killing. This is a film that I like just a little bit more. Came out a year after, and it's just a little bit more fleshed out. Clocks in at 85 minutes, so it takes a little bit more time to tell its story. And the acting in this by Sterling Hayden is phenomenal. I really enjoyed this film when I first saw it. Now getting into the top 10. Now, these are the 10 films that pretty much every Kubrick fan has heard of or have seen. And at number 10, I placed Lolita, just because of the subject matter. Now, I'm not going to talk about what the film's about today because I don't want my video to get striked, but you can go and look it up. I would actually advise looking up what Lolita is about before you watch the film, because it is pretty dark. I also highly recommend the book by Nabokov. Nabokov's one of the greatest Russian writers, one of the greatest writers, period, of all time. And that book is terrific, so I highly recommend reading that and also watching the film. At number 9, I have another film that's dark and quite weird. It's Eyes Wide Shut. Anytime I bring this film up to my mom, she's a big Tom Cruise fan. She always says, "Oh yeah, that's that really weird Tom Cruise film that I don't like." And I'm like, "How could you not like this film? It's terrific." I understand why she finds it weird, though. It's definitely another film that I can't talk about the subject matter, so go look it up before you watch it. But some of the best cinematography in Stanley's career is in this film, and it's the last film he ever made. It came out in 1999, but some of the best visuals I've seen from him. This is his best use of colors, in my opinion, too. The colors in this are just so moody, and it feels like a Wong Kar-wai film. Really, really love Eyes Wide Shut. At number 8, I have Spartacus. If you're a fan of history or cinema history, I would highly recommend checking out Spartacus. Most people have either seen or have heard of the scene, I am Spartacus, no, I am Spartacus, no, I am Spartacus. It's an iconic movie scene, and the whole movie is iconic. Kirk Douglas doesn't carry the film, but he's a big reason on why the film is so great. His acting in this is tremendous. It does clock in at 197 minutes, so it is a bit longer. But for coming out in 1960, it's still in color. There's a lot of extras, a lot of big sets. I do still find it to be a pretty accessible film, even though it is that long. At number 7, I have Paths of Glory. Now, the reason why I put this above Spartacus is because I think this is one of the most, if not the most, underrated war film ever. It centers around World War I, and the way it kind of plays off the dichotomy of the generals who were commanding the army from countries away and the soldiers who were fighting on the front lines and what that relationship was like. It does that tremendously, and I think it's another one of Kirk Douglas's best performances of all time. Highly, highly recommend Paths of Glory. At number 6, I have another war film, one of the best of all time, Full Metal Jacket. This film came out in 1987, and when I first saw this film as a kid, I was quoting it for about a month. There are so many quotable lines in this film, so many great moments. It kind of has like a split too. There's kind of like the first part of the movie where it's like the boot camp stuff, and then the second part of the movie almost feels like a completely separate movie. So I like films that can do that, and especially it can do that with clocking it at just under 2 hours. It's a tremendous, tremendous film. A lot of people's favorite Stanley Kubrick film, and I can see why. There's so many iconic characters in it. But yeah, Full Metal Jacket almost made my top 5. At number 5, I have Barry Lyndon. The reason why this is at 5 for me is because I think it's the most beautifully shot Kubrick film, and probably the most beautifully shot film I have ever seen in my life. Now, there is one film that came out recently that I think surpasses it slightly, and that's Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Highly recommend checking out that film too. I think it's the only film right now that was shot in 8K, and you could tell it was shot in 8K. Portrait of a Lady on Fire is a beautiful film, but before that film came out, I always held Barry Lyndon as the most beautiful film I have ever seen in my life. Now, the story is still great, the acting is still great, but that's not really the strong suit of Barry Lyndon. Barry Lyndon kind of makes its name off of the cinematography. When you talk about every frame or every shot being a painting, this movie exemplifies that more than any film I've ever seen. Every single still from this movie you could put up on a wall and have some people come over and they'll think that that's like a Rembrandt or something. It is outstanding what Kubrick was able to do with this, especially in 1975. The lighting, the costumes, the staging, everything is just perfect, and it's really visually pleasing to watch. At number 4, I have Dr. Strangelove. Now, this is probably my favorite dark comedy of all time. I don't know exactly how to recommend it to people because I know it's not going to be for everybody. If you're a history buff, if you love World War II and the Cold War and stuff like that, I think you'll find it pretty funny. Even now, like this film came out in 1964, and even now the humor is still pretty sharp and witty and speaks to things that are happening today. And yeah, just coming in at 95 minutes, it's a pretty short watch too. And yeah, one of my favorite dark comedies ever. That ending scene with him on the nuke waving his hat is just, I burst out laughing every time I see it. Getting into my top 3. Okay, so these 3 I could shuffle around any day of the week and kind of be happy with it. At number 3, I put Clockwork Orange for now, just because it's probably my least watched out of these top 3 films. Only because it's a hard watch. If you've ever read the book, it's a bit of a shorter book, so I feel like some of you may have read it in high school. But if you've ever read the book, it's insane. And the movie somehow is even more insane. This came out in 1971, so you got to keep that in mind when you're watching it. It is a nutty, nutty film. It feels like an R-rated version of Alice in Wonderland in some ways. And it's definitely Malcolm McDowell's best performance of all time. It actually heavily, heavily influenced Heath Ledger's Joker. So if you love The Dark Knight and you want to see like kind of the inspiration for that version of the Joker, go back and watch Clockwork Orange. And again, it deals with some pretty heavy themes, so maybe look into it a little bit before you go watch it if you don't know what it's about. Getting into my top 2. At number 2, I have, in my opinion, the greatest horror film of all time, The Shining. To me, this is the best horror film ever made because it has the slasher elements, but it also has this weird, nostalgic, surrealist vibe with the Overlook Hotel. And I'll eventually do a full film analysis video on this film. There's tons and tons of other film analysis out there on YouTube. I highly recommend going and watching them. There's a great documentary, Room 237, which kind of gets into the behind the scenes of how this film was made and why it's so brilliant. But one thing I will say about it now is that the Overlook Hotel in this film is it's kind of its own character. It's really weird. There's really no other film that has a place that has this much personality and character in the film. It's eerie. I've had many, many, many dreams inside of the Overlook Hotel. And maybe Hogwarts comes close in the way that it builds kind of a character out of a place. But yeah, I love The Shining. I just rewatched it recently, and it is endlessly deep. And it's just over 2 hours. Came out in 1980. But even then, even for 1980, this film is shocking and boundary pushing, and it still feels new today. And yeah, I could talk about this film forever. And number one, another film that I could talk about till the end of time. This is a film that I consider to be probably the most important film ever made. Now, when people talk about the greatest film or the best film ever made, a lot of times films like Shawshank Redemption get brought up, or The Godfather, right? Those are the films you usually see at the top of those kind of lists. And while those are great, amazing dramas and almost unmatched in their respected categories, I think 2001: A Space Odyssey is it's on a different level. It's I say it's one of the most important films of all time because of the messages in it, and like the characters aren't super strong, the dynamics between the characters aren't incredibly strong. It's more so about the themes and the concepts in the film, and it explores it extremely well, especially for coming out in 1968. When you go back and you watch this film and you think this came out before we landed on the moon, it's mind-blowing. Yeah, the relationship between Hal and Bowman is terrific too, and the way it talks about AI, especially for the time. Man, this film is special. Like I'm surprised it's shocking that it's real. Like, it's shocking that it exists because it is such a deep film. Now, there's films that have come close that feel almost like a spiritual successor to 2001, and those films I would say are like The Matrix, films of that cloth that do a similar thing. But 2001 was really the first film to do that, to take an incredibly complex topic and to make it into something that's accessible. And I know when this film first came out, it came out to kind of bad reviews, and it took a while for people to get it, but once they got it, it instantly became one of the greatest films of all time, and I can't help but put it number one. So that's my list for today. Let me know in the comments where you guys would rank his films. This is one of the hardest directors I've ever had to do a rankings for, because I feel like I could shuffle the cards any way and really be happy with it. He's made so many amazing films, and he's always going to be one of my top 3, top 5 directors of all time, just for the impact he's had on my life watching his films. And yeah, let me know in the comments, like, what was your how did you guys engage with Stanley Kubrick for the first time? That would be interesting to hear about. So let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps boost this channel in the algorithm. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.